Good. Hi, thank you for hosting this webinar. And I have several questions. Like I would say the most pressing one is, what is the LSE approach towards ethics and data analytics?
Oh, great. You said a few. Do you want to ask them all at once, or and I'll.
The other is this course for professionals who work already in the industry, or is it a valid option for those looking for a career change?
Okay.
And the last one is, do you provide assistance after the course for job placement?
Okay, I'll touch on those perhaps in reverse order as my brain works. So in terms of support, so during the 6 months of the Career Accelerator itself, you would have access to a career coach to guide you, and the nature of the coaching would be student or learner specific, and so everyone's needs will be different, but this will be a more personalized service. You would have a one-to-one session with them at the very start of the Career Accelerator, so they can be more, so you can discuss your particular career hopes and aspirations, and they can give you coaching throughout those 6 months. To the extent to which you post the event, I can't give a certainty on that, but I would expect some sort of alumni support network longer term. We are just having our first cohort started now, so as yet there are no alumni of the program. The second question, just my memory, was about, is it for working professionals or other? It's open really to all. I would say of this first cohort, for the majority, they will be working professionals, but it's not, we are not preventing access to others. But our main entry criteria would be the expectation of a graduate degree in some fields, typically with at least one quantitative module in there, like sort of mathematics or statistics 101, to demonstrate some preliminary quantitative proficiency, but there'll be others who perhaps bypassed university altogether, have many years work experience, but not a graduate degree, and applications will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, it tends to be in our first cohort working professionals themselves at various stages. So this is quite a heterogeneous cohort of students, and I would expect that in future intakes as well. Some are looking to reskill, so they have some basic data expertise, but wish to take that to the next level. To upskill, sorry. Some will be looking to reskill in that they have expertise in a different field, but are aware of and appreciate the importance of data in decision making and want to sort of put their toe in the water with regards to that. I would say, given that most are working professionals, and indeed most would have been graduates, that means all learners have, nearly all learners have experience of university style learning. But if they've been in the workplace for several years, working and studying are requiring different demands of the brain. And so particularly in the orientation and the early part of course one, it's about getting people back into like a study mode. So we are very much open to all. The skill sets at the start of the Career Accelerator will vary greatly among learners. And indeed that diversity is a great strength of the program. There'll be many opportunities to collaborate with your peers, and whereas one person may have a bit more coding expertise coming into the program, others may be a bit more well-versed in sort of with communication skills, delivering presentations, etc. So opportunities really for learners to learn from each other as well. And your opening question was on data ethics and integrity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So of course, well, not just LSE, I would say all credible institutions should take this extremely seriously, and ingrained within the curriculum not necessarily every week, but we will allude to issues of data security, protecting your data. Candice mentioned that at the start of this session with regards to the AMA, also with the dissemination of data. And actually we held an AMA session this morning, and a good question that came up in that session was about the use and also misuse, not by LSE per se, but in general, the use and misuse of data, such that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, and that's of course very much true. So we train you to be objective users of data. For example, if you were to create a dashboard, make sure that what's presented is not misleading in any way, but also to be able to call out misuse of data or how data are presented by other parties. So, I mean, the misinformation in the digital age, I mean, it's not a problem I think humanity will erase overnight, but the more people we train in objective forms of data analysis, presentation, and sort of the commentary they give on that data, the better. So yes, treatment is given to the data ethics, particularly towards the final week of course one. There's a segment on that, but that will be a sort of recurring theme throughout the Accelerator.
Thank you.
Thanks. I actually also just want to add quickly just to the first question the third question you had. The first question James asked.
First answered.
Yes, just in terms of the community that you are a part of when you join the Career Accelerator, that is something you continue to be a part of post Accelerator as well. So in the same way, you'll have access to your coaches and experts and people within that community that will be taken forward post your completion, and you'll still be able to get a lot of the same value that you did during through the community. I hope that also answers your question.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay, I will turn to the I think some of the chat, some of the Q&A. I'll hop to the Q&A window. I will look at this at the upvotes. One is I'd be really interested to hear whether data languages I learn are future-proof. I love that term, future-proof, or will they only be useful for a limited amount of time? Well, of course, the future is highly uncertain. Allegedly, the only certainties in life I think of death and taxes, and for me sometimes computer crashes. So what's the future of the sort of labor market 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or beyond? And of course any of us today can make a prediction, and time will tell to what extent they are proven right or wrong. But data languages, perhaps I'll rephrase this slightly, perhaps in terms of maybe programming or coding languages. Again, excellent question, and something similar this morning for me at least. And I offered up an analogy in that let's just consider languages, human languages, spoken languages as a starting point. I mean, globally, I mean, there must be probably tens of thousands of languages or dialects, maybe some only spoken by a very small number of individuals. And if you are lucky to be a polyglot, in which case I'm deeply envious, I did study spoken languages, but Y or Z years ago, and I'm very rusty on them. Even one of the world's leading polyglots, there's a limit as to how many languages they could ever be reasonably fluent in a lifespan. And likewise with programming or coding languages, no one's ever going to be an expert in everything. Now, what does the future look like with regards to programming languages? I can make a prediction as can anyone, but of course it's not guaranteed to come to fruition. We can certainly look historically, looking at the trends for popularity of languages. And it seems, particularly in the last few years, Python has tended to be a popular tool of choice. And indeed, in part because of that and current demands of industry, current demands don't guarantee future demands. But I think for the foreseeable future, let's say the next 5 to 10 years, it's somewhat foolish to predict much beyond that time horizon, that Python will seem to be a very popular choice. And that is why in course 2 of the Career Accelerator, there is a strong grounding in Python. But I'm sure many of you will be aware there are other languages out there. And indeed, in course 3, focusing more on advanced analytics, alongside Python, there is the introduction of R. So my analogy with spoken languages is that you will never know them all, but the more languages you are familiar with, particularly within a particular family of languages, I think the easier it is to acquire new languages on a need to know, need to use, or need to speak basis. So I'm fairly Euro-centric, so my long ago proficiency in some European languages would mean if I put in the time and effort, and I doubt I ever will, but if I did, I would feel reasonably confident in picking up new languages of the same sort of family. And I think the same applies to sort of programming, coding languages. The more you learn, the easier it is to pick up on new ones on a need to know, need to use basis. But one has to always be grounded and have realistic expectations. No one ever knows everything. But I would say Python seems at the moment, and hence for the foreseeable future, seems to be a real leading choice. And indeed, that's why we tend to have more of a Python than R focus in the Career Accelerator. Well, linking on that, just my eye has been caught. Do you foresee data analysis as a critical skill within the next 50 years? So a 50-year time horizon. It's great. I'm very happy to make predictions today about what will happen in 50 years time, because I can't be proven wrong in those for the next 50 years. So very long-term predictions, forecasts would be are always quite a safe bet, because we're depending 100 or 200 years future, I am unlikely to be around to have to face the consequences if I end up being very wrong. So, well, let's make some projections for the next 50 years. You are welcome to agree or disagree. You have perhaps heard a lot about automation of jobs. I think there's a lot of hype around that. And but nonetheless, it's I think a reality today. But different sectors or different kinds of job roles are more susceptible to automation than others. And looking out for the next 10, 20, okay, let's go for 50 years. I think the demand for humans, machines are clever, but they lack empathy, and I can't see humans, machines replacing humans in my lifetime is my bet. I mean, well into the future, who knows? So I think the demand for people with the right quantitative skills to make sense of data, and a computer can follow an algorithm and just do what it's told, but to we need that human element of common sense to be able to draw out useful, practical business insights from the data. And I think for all of us on this call, I don't know your ages, but anticipating your expected length of career going forward, I think that demand is not going to dissipate. If anything, it's just going to increase, certainly in the next 5, 10, 15 years time horizon. And sort of economics 101, you demand supply. Demand from industry, public sector as well. By no means is this exclusively the private sector domain. Demand vastly outstrips supply, meaning supply of people, graduates or working professionals with the requisite skills. And in Econ 101, when demand exceeds supply, the price goes up. And the price, of course, in this instance would be the salaries that individuals can command. And I can foresee continued strictly increase of demand. While supply will be increasing, I don't think it's going to be increasing at the rate to keep pace with demand. And hence, for all of us here, I think this is very much good news in that we are in an in-demand sector today, and I think certainly for the next, let's say 10 years, playing for 50 years as well, that demand will remain. Oh, and I should just link to that actually. I mean, regularly, and don't just take it from me. I mean, look at reports by organizations like the World Economic Forum, The Economist. They will routinely sort of publish report, and various consultancies, Ernst & Young, etc., Accenture, will frequently publish reports on the state of the labor market, the jobs of the present, and also the future. And you will tend to see that data related jobs, a data analyst or business analyst, in a fairly loosely defined way for now, those sorts of positions regularly feature in demand jobs now, but also of the future. Right, okay, you're very good with these questions, asking me anything, keeping me on my toes. Next one, Atif, what would be academic equivalent of this program? Will it be considered a postgraduate diploma? Excellent, excellent question. So now this is a unique, a bespoke program whereby we are blending the academics in terms of the LSE side, but also the practical and industry focus, and that's where FourthRev is coming in. And numerous masterclasses hosted by various experts in the field. So where is it sort of positioned in the hierarchy of qualifications as such? Excellent question. So I would say a good way of thinking about this. Most participants will have been graduates, so they went to university X years ago, and studied whatever a discipline, but by no means all learners have a degree. So we are thinking of this, for the most part, as sort of being a postgraduate learning opportunity. It is not a full master's degree. Indeed, there was a question in the AMA this morning from a prospective learner who is looking to enroll on a full master's program and potentially a PhD thereafter, and was inquiring how beneficial this career accelerator would be in pursuing those endeavors. And if I may, I'll sort of frame the question in that light. And they said, basically, what advantage would the career accelerator give in that setting? And my response was, well, and particularly they were keen to come to LSE for their masters. I said, well, fun fact, I love fun facts. LSE is first and foremost a postgraduate university. We have more master students than we do undergraduate students. And in that sense, we are very special because almost all universities, their undergraduate cohorts dominate. And as such, it's a very competitive entry process. And indeed, of all reputable universities around the world, so ignoring any potential nepotism, admissions to master's programs is done on a competitive entry basis. And a postgraduate cohort is always far more demographically diverse than for an undergraduate cohort. When I say demographically, principally in terms of age. Most people enrolling on undergraduate programs, 17, borderline 18, 19, maybe they took a gap year. So the variation of ages for undergraduates is quite minimal. Whereas for master's degrees, some master's students, they enroll straight off the back of their undergraduate studies, but many will have taken several years of work experience, and when they feel the time is right for them, they enroll. And so it is a highly competitive process. And so something like this career accelerator is, I think, a great signal to master's admissions officers. And I think let's link this to employment as well. Maybe you're keen just to go off into the real world of work. And this career accelerator, having it on your CV, on your resume, I think it's fair to say would give you a competitive edge. I mean, there are no certainties in matters of gaining specific job positions or places on master's degrees or PhDs or anything else, but it's all about maximizing your probability of success. And I mean, for me, because I've been heavily involved in the design of the curriculum and the style of learning on the Accelerator, it's this blend of the academic and the practical. Because if I'm honest, most universities or in-house exclusive programs tend to be quite abstract and academic in nature. Maybe fine if you wish to signal your intelligence, but in terms of then being able to make a real impact in a job in the real world, often standard university programs are perhaps not optimized for that outcome. Whereas with this Career Accelerator, very much links to industry and industry input. We've had a lot of expert advisors on making sure that what people learn over the 6 months is a practical use for businesses. So I appreciate, sorry, a convoluted answer to this. So now, how is a Career Accelerator really perceived? I suppose that's another way of framing the question. It's still quite a new style of learning. Indeed, I mean, this is LSE's very first foray into the field of career accelerators. And I'll be honest, before I was invited to be involved with it, I had not heard of the term career accelerator previously. Now I probably use it multiple times a day in various meetings with individuals. I'm very aware of it, but perhaps beyond those of us in this call, what is the awareness of a career accelerator among Masters of Admissions officers or HR departments at various organizations? Perhaps fair to say it's patchy, but I can see this model of career accelerator growing in prominence and therefore wider awareness going forward. Now, as and when you market yourself to an employer or a Master's of Admissions officer, whatever the next stage for you would be, I mean, and this is where the career coaches and success managers will be able to assist with you and prepare you for this. But you do, of course, need to be able to market yourself well. And it's how you can basically convince an interviewer, say, that you are right for a particular position. And particularly for roles with a heavy data flavor, which I'm guessing you would all be looking to go into that kind of area, the formation of a portfolio from the 6 months of the Accelerator, the various projects you'd be undertaking, culminating in the final employer project. So working with real data as set by an employer. ThoughtWorks for our first cohort to work on a real data problem, and being able to demonstrate practical skills and how one can make, say, a real world impact. I think that is something that other kinds of perhaps more standard academic programs struggle to do. Hopefully that's offers some insight to that question. Then one from Anonymous. That's a great name, Anonymous. Dr. Abdey, I like the formality. I love that. I'd love to hear about the differences between data analytics and data science. Is it just about the size of the data sets? Ooh, good question. Good question. All good questions. I mean, if one had to offer up definitions of, let's say, data analytics versus data science, I mean, what answers would you get? It would very much depend on who was answering those questions. If I may, I'm going to pick up on the size of the data sets part of your question. And if I may, let me bring in the phrase big data, big data. Even that, I mean, I'm sure it's a term you've all encountered, but if one has to offer a definition of big data, again, different people would offer their different viewpoints on it. I'll give my 2 or 3 cents on it. We are surrounded by data. Another fun fact, it's been estimated that in the last 2 or 3 years, we as in humanity has probably collected more data digitally than in the rest of human history combined. You've probably heard about Moore's laws and growth in computational power, well, just the sheer volume of data being collected. I mean, if we extrapolate that, if that trend continues, then let's say 3 years from now, if we imagine all data ever recorded up to today, that volume again could be generated in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, a staggering volume of data. So there's no shortage of the volume, but to another question, critical skills or in-demand skills of data analysis. I mean, the shortage is not of data, but of the people to make sense of that data. So big data itself offers vast opportunities, but also many challenges as well. So in terms of the V's, literally the volume of data, the variety of data types, structured versus unstructured. Are you looking at sentiment from social media posts right now? I mean, in the UK, there's some dissatisfaction perhaps with the what's been going on in Downing Street's been dominating the news waves here. So is it trying to assess social media outrage? Is it structured data, nicely already arranged in a spreadsheet? So the variety, the velocity, literally the speed at which data is being collected. Also, one of mine I like is vanity of big data sets, is that when you start exploring them and trying to find relationships, the more times you look at doing things, inevitably you're going to make discoveries just by the sheer number of combinations of pairings of variables you may investigate. And there's a big danger of the big data era of that a sort of spurious result, or perhaps a false positives. And of course, just having the data infrastructure in place to deal with vast data sets. So data analytics versus data science, I would say, and this is more of an opinion rather than a sort of statement of fact. For me, data analytics, and hence this career accelerator in data analytics framed, not data science framed, is really more about drawing insights from data and a strong emphasis on the decision making that can be taken as a consequence. So, mini spoiler alert here. In course 1 of the Career Accelerator, a focus on Excel, so things like the pivot tables, also data visualization through Tableau, the construction of dashboards from which it's of course a great skill to develop the dashboards, but then also to communicate the key takeaways to, let's say, the ultimate decision makers in an organization, who may not necessarily be the data analysts actually producing those fancy charts. It's perhaps the senior leadership. And so a really good data analyst has excellent communication skills, whether that's orally through a spoken presentation, or whether it's written through, let's say, a summary report, an executive summary, say, of one's findings. So for me, data analysts, and the size of the data set, not so relevant here. It could be small, it could be large. Gosh, our little poll there had 3 data points, 3 responses. By no means a big data set, yet there was already a few things we could deduce from it. So data analysts more on the insights which can be drawn, but potentially drawing upon quite large databases. And indeed, in course 1, having been immersed into the wonderful world of Excel, also looking at database management using SQL or SQL, depending on your personal preference of saying it. I quite like SQL, just cute, than SQL, but really think of it as like Excel for big data sets. Data science is perhaps focusing a bit more on sort of the IT side, the technology side of dealing with vast data sets. But in practice, maybe the lines get a little bit blurred, and in an organization, depending how big or small it was, maybe a role you took might actually traverse different aspects of what a data analyst might be expected to do versus a data scientist. So it's not clear cut. It's not a clear cut. So we deliberately decided to frame this as a data analytics career accelerator with a strong emphasis on how to do analysis, but also how to communicate the results of the analysis. Hi, James. I was wondering what your thoughts were on the most useful coding languages for a data analyst these days. Excellent question. A great starter. This is a nice one to come up because this is a question which is frequently asked in all sorts of contexts, and therefore I know exactly how to respond. I suppose I'll begin by saying, it depends. Or if I may, I like to take an analogy. Analogies really are perfect in life, but I think they're great from a sort of teaching perspective. You mentioned coding languages. Let's just take away the word coding for a moment. Just consider sort of ordinary sort of spoken languages, of which there must be probably what, tens of thousands of languages, dialects, etc. around the world. Now, I did study languages years ago. W there, a few languages, and I love languages, but I didn't practice them and have become extremely rusty since. But one needs to be realistic in a language setting, in that no one is ever, even a polyglot. Maybe if you're lucky, you might master 10 or 12 languages fairly fluently in a lifetime, okay, but not realistically much beyond that. Turning to coding languages, the more you know, the better it is, but one needs to be realistic, and you can't know everything. Specifically, the question about, just a bit, I think, answered. I'm still answering. The most useful. Well, as of today, I would say things like Python and also R would be extremely useful. Clearly, though, things change over time, and what will be sort of dominant coding languages in 5, 10, 20, 30 years time, your remaining career span is expected to be, but things do change. But I would say it's not so much about which specific languages, coding languages or spoken languages you know, just that the more you know, the easier it is to learn new ones on a need to know or need to use basis. Now, it may be that a specific employer has a preference for one coding language over another. And clearly, other things equal, it will be, if one was applying for a job in that situation, it will be better to already know that coding language than not. But like spoken languages, if you say you can speak 5 languages, but an employer wants you to be able to speak a different one, if you can demonstrate proficiency in 5, learning another one shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, arguably, spoken languages, I mean, there are different families of languages, and perhaps, sort of European language versus an Asian language, perhaps not so easy to go from one to another, but from coding languages, I would say knowledge of one makes it very easy to have mastery of others. Of course, this should be linked to the Career Accelerator and what programming languages are included there. Well, not just on programming languages, but more generally, when we designed the curriculum, of course, the 3 courses leading into the final employer project, we were always mindful, we meaning LSE and FourthRev, mindful about the demands of industry and giving you very much in-demand skills. So Python is more dominant within the Career Accelerator, featuring in course 2, but also some exposure to R in course 3. But say like languages within a particular family of languages. Once you know one and the basics of sort of syntax, grammar, some vocabulary, I think you're being able to pick up similar languages, programming languages in future, very easy to do. One other point, if I may. I mean, mastery of a spoken language, practice makes perfect. And how quickly, if you speak multiple languages, how long did it take you to achieve some basic proficiency into intermediate, ultimately perhaps fluency? Was it weeks, months, years? Clearly, people will pick these up at different moments or at different rates. And in any language, no one will know every word or every grammar rule. With coding languages, I would say to be able to learn how to do everything in a particular coding language to achieve that mastery, that would take indeed time, and practice makes perfect. But long-winded answer. But Python seemed at present, and in recent, looking at recent trends, Python seems to be extremely popular due to its sort of it's perhaps easier to pick up than R, and that's why in the Career Accelerator we give you a lot of exposure to Python first, such that you are then more familiar with coding languages, and then in the second half of course 3, some exposure of R. But it can just be a personal preference. Take computers, are you Windows, are you Mac? Broadly, it doesn't matter that much. You can send an email or you write a document using either, but then perhaps you have one preference over another.
Awesome. There's actually another question in the chat, sorry, about confusion, from Kevin. Will there be opportunities to hone my soft skills, for example, critical thinking, communication, working under pressure, such that I'd master them by the end of the course?
Yes, yes, and yes. So I really like this Career Accelerator because it's not a it's not a conventional academic program. So with the LSE, yes, a lot of learners on the first cohort who just started their first formal week of instruction on yesterday, in fact, yes, 31st of Jan. Of course, the prestige of the LSE and saying you studied material curated by LSE is a sort of big selling point. But for standard internal LSE programs, they tend to be almost exclusively academic oriented, which I mean are great things, but I always care about real world applicability. And throughout the Career Accelerator, and this is where FourthRev brings significant added value, is to focus not just on the academic, but also, shall we say, well, you mentioned soft skills. I'm going to call them a mixture of, well, communication skills, transferable skills, etc. And built into the curriculum, really from day one onwards, is developing, focusing on different areas at one time or another, those soft skills. I will perhaps just give a few examples. Clearly, it's an online Career Accelerator, and therefore there is an obvious challenge of studying completely remotely. And of course, maybe some people will have a fear of perhaps some type of maybe alienation if you're studying seemingly in an isolated way. Well, we clearly wish to foster a strong sense of online community or the collaboration, and you would start to meet your peers in an orientation, two-week orientation framework. And then throughout the accelerator itself, opportunities to be working in teams, giving peer review feedback, which in itself, I say, is an excellent skill to be done, not so much in an overly critical way, but in a sort of constructive criticism, to review people's work, be it a sample dashboard or a little bit of a code, and offer their views about what was good about it or what could potentially be improved. But there is a strong emphasis indeed on those soft skills, some presentations. You'll be recording some pieces to camera, you'll be writing some written reports. So communication, of course, has various angles, the oral, the written, and also listening. Perhaps I was slightly guilty of not being a great listener, depending on context. But being able to listen, I think, is a great skill as well. So yes, we try to take quite a sort of holistic approach to our curriculum development, and many opportunities for developing those skills, culminating in that employer project after your three main courses. And you'll be working as part of a team, of course, you're geographically very dispersed, and being able to work effectively as a collective. And I'd like to think, given everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, that the output of a team effort to something is typically greater, strictly greater, than the sum of its individual parts. And inevitably, some people are better on the coding side, some people are better on the visualization side, but as a unit, as a group, I think for the employer project, and where one can sort of consolidate all of those soft skill learnings from throughout the Career Accelerator to that point, in demonstration of a very valuable final project, which would be great for giving us a case study and a portfolio at a job interview.
We have Rashid. Rashid, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are.
No, good morning. I'm close by in Amsterdam, so so all good.
Okay.
I'm braving the mic here. So I've got, if you allow me, I have two questions. Hopefully, the first one is a fairly quick one, and that is, you know, understanding fully that this is a career accelerator. If the sort of the ultimate goal for somebody to go through something to obtain a master's or eventually a PhD in data science or data analytics, how would you rate this on sort of that trajectory, specifically around, you know, what sort of possibilities are there within the LSE? My second question, and feel free not to answer it because I don't want to take too much time here, is, you know, with specifically the world that we live in today and the misinformation and all of that, you know, the one side of data analytics and dashboard creation and what have you is sometimes allows for misuse potentially. And kind of giving sound bites to a lot of media outlets, let's say, for the lack of a better phrase now. So where does the engineer or the data scientist sort of preserve, or what can one do to preserve the integrity of what they are doing in that sense? And like I said, feel free not to answer the second question. I don't want to take too much.
No. I think two very contrasting questions. If I may, I'll take them in reverse order, if I may. So take the, I mean, it's a very valid point, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Now, okay, in an ideal world, and I appreciate, well, this is not always as we would wish it to be, but in an ideal world, I think, well, let's rephrase it. Okay, everyone sees the world through their own eyes in whatever respect, economically, politically, whatever. We all see the world through our own eyes, and we have our own perceptions of the world. And that's natural. You know, we're human, and inevitably one has perceptions on anything. However, I think most people's perceptions on most things in any domain often differ from the reality. So a major problem in the world, I would say, for poor decision-making is this, I'll call it like a perception reality gap. Okay? In that most people tend to make decisions based on their perceptions. Of course, if those perceptions are severely distorted for whatever reasons, if they differ significantly from reality, then the decisions they make are unlikely to be good decisions. So where does data come in? Well, if small but critically important word, if we have good quality data, there is potential, I'm not saying it's always achieved, but there is potential to, if not eliminate, at least try and sort of reduce that sort of perception reality gap. Take COVID, for example, COVID charts. I'm sure I think you are geographically looking at the chat, Prague, Amsterdam, etc., etc. So you're all in different parts of the world, and you must have seen COVID charts related to your own country and maybe some international comparisons as well. Now, clearly, just on terms of how a COVID chart is put together, the narrative that or the story you're trying to convey is clearly potentially sensitive to how that visualization is constructed. What are you plotting? Is it hospitalizations? Is it cases? Is it fatality savvy? Is it using a linear scale or a logarithmic scale? Are you zooming in on a particular part of the chart to try and convey massive growth or reduction in cases when actually the reality, if you were zooming out and looking at it more objectively, perhaps the story is quite different. So clearly there is, I think the fact that a huge amount of misinformation out there. Clearly what we would wish to do in the Career Accelerator is to teach you to, if you are yourselves ever analyzing data, visualizing it, whatever, for public consumption or consumption within an organization, that you do this in a very much an objective way and not be deliberately misleading, but also to train you in these, not to make you do things in a misleading way, but to make you aware about what the what the little tricks of the trade are to give a misleading picture, such that if you were to ever critique the analysis of others in whatever domain, that you can sort of be a force for good and call out misinformation, which of course might be unintentional. So yeah, there's a lot of use of data, there's a lot of abuse of data, absolutely fair to say. But how do we combat that? Well, you've got to start somewhere, and the more people we can train the right way and to do things objectively, I think the best we can hope for. To touch on your first question, so leading into say like a master's degree, ultimately a PhD. Well, in terms of sequencing, in the UK system, whether it's LSE or other institutions, but go LSE. That's my LSE red as well. Sorry, it's Chinese New Year, but also LSE red is the main corporate color there. So there you go. And that's why I had a choice of backgrounds. There was a blue one and a pinkish one. Sorry, I'm sorry, digressing. I've not checked. Sorry. You see, I had that choice as well, but you see, I thought there you don't get the contrast with the red, so I'm gone for this one. And Candice, by chance, have the same one as me. I'm sorry. Most universities in UK, and I'd say broadly around the world, if one wishes to do a PhD, you would tend to do a master's degree first. Okay, US, they tend to sometimes package up a master's and a PhD as one thing and begin with the master's and transition into the PhD. So how does a career accelerator fit into this? So, I mean, I'm sure you've been aware of our various sort of entry criteria. For the most part, career accelerators will have had a degree in some area, usually with at least one sort of quantitative module in there. Maybe exceptions, maybe someone had not been to university, and provided they can demonstrate some proficiency, and we want to maximize access to this program. But where would we sort of position it in sort of the hierarchy of sort of qualifications? Well, I would say, I mean, we are pitching this, say the vast majority are graduates in some fields, so we can put this in sort of the postgraduate category, albeit it's not a sort of full master's degree. In terms of applying for masters at places, LSE, in fact, because you mentioned it, it's allowed to speak on about LSE, we are, fun fact, primarily a postgraduate university. We have more master students at LSE than undergraduate students. And that is very much the exception to the rule. Almost all universities, the undergraduates dominates in size. So huge numbers of master's programs. And be it LSE or elsewhere, there's a lot of competition for places on master's programs. And almost all universities would operate a competitive entry process. I say nearly all. There may be some nepotism in various parts of the world, but you know, I think anywhere you would wish to go, competitive entry. And of course, there's more heterogeneity of master's applicants than undergraduate applicants. Undergrads, for the most part, say 17, 18, 19 years old, maybe they had a gap year, albeit no traveling much for the last year for conventional gap years, but they tend to be of a very similar age group. Masters, much more variable. Yes, some will complete a bachelor's degree and wish to go straight into masters, either because they were unable to get a job or a bit apprehensive about going into the real world and just delay that inevitability for another year. But we also have large numbers of master's applicants as sort of mature students, which is very broadly defined, with very different experiences, work experience. So anything that gives you a competitive edge. Now, there are no certainties in life, other than death, taxes, and for me, sometimes computer credits. But everything else is uncertain. So in this world of uncertainty, the best you can do is to increase or maximize your probability of success. So I would say this very objectively, the Career Accelerator, having this, other things equal, having this on your CV, in an application for a master's program does not guarantee a place, but I think would, particularly if you're looking for a more data-oriented master's degree, obviously, would give you a competitive edge in that admissions process. But admissions officers, I mean, they will take a holistic view of every applicant. It's not just qualifications. A personal statement why you want to do a particular master's degree matters enormously. And I'm not saying the exact percentage weighting attributed to that, but you could have a best CV, but if your personal statement was abysmal, then that's probably certainly an instant rejection. So I'd say this is a great value add. I see no real downside to it, and especially if you're looking for a more quantitative master's degree, ultimately into PhD, I think this will be highly beneficial because of some of those core skills you'd be obtaining. Those soft skills matter. And a lot of master's applicants, they trumpet their academic achievements, which may, of course, always good to have, but maybe are unable to work in a group or are unable to stand up and give a presentation, etc. And clearly in the quant sphere, some coding expertise like Python and a little bit of R as we train you in, again, that would all add value to the application. So no certainties, but I think this would very much increase your probability of success.
Amazing. That's a
yes,
great
that was a good answer, wasn't it? I thought that's like,
I
I was quite proud of that one.
Rashid can comment if he wants.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Amazing.
Great.
Okay, so I'm quite aware that we're a little bit over time. We do have one raised hand and one more question. James, are you able to stay and answer those two?
I am. I know I had a meeting just before this one, but I have nothing in the diary straight after. So.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, cool. So if anyone else would like to leave, please feel free. But otherwise, I'm going to ask you Munashe's question. I apologize if I pronounced your name incorrectly. But Munashe is asking, as a novice to data analytics, how easy is it to get up to speed, as I have no programming and coding language or experience?
Great question. And I was mentioning about heterogeneity of master's applicants. Well, I'd say the same would apply, well, looking at our first cohort for the Career Accelerator. I reviewed several of the applications, and I could see huge variation in skill sets that people were bringing to the table, as it were. This should not be a concern at all. Broadly, a slight spoiler alert here. So in course one, after you've been onboarded and with your orientation, course one is a gentle introduction. We are conscious that for many aspiring career accelerators, while you've all had an education previously, you may have been out of a formal learning environment potentially for several years. If you've just been working in an office for X years, clearly you've been working, but working versus studying are two different things. And for some, potentially, if I had to suddenly sit an exam today, my exam skills, and you do as I say, not as I do, my exam skills are no doubt terribly rusty. So course one is a little bit about getting you back into the swing of learning, and fairly gentle introduction in course one, focusing on Excel. And I'm sure all of you have dabbled in it to some extent, but hopefully a few new top tips and tricks to use in Excel. Tableau for dashboarding, very easy to do. If you've never used Tableau, the great thing, one of the great things about it is its ease of navigability. So drag and drop interface, and within about an hour's playing around with it, you can actually start to generate some pretty decent visualizations. Some SQL or SQL, depending on pronunciation, if you prefer, on databases and basic database management in course one. And the programming, the coding really starts to come in course two. Now, inevitably, I would expect of anyone who's interested in a data analytics career accelerator, almost inevitably some would have some prior programming experience for general interest. However, there's no expectation of it. Clearly, those who do have some prior exposure to it will be at a slightly advantage or head start, as it were, in the programming content. But just to take the Career Accelerator as a whole, everyone joining will have some prior knowledge in one or other specific area that the Career Accelerator touches on, whether that's Excel, whether that's a bit of visualization, Tableau we use, Power BI, some of you may have had exposure to previously, or whether it's coding. But this is why there's a strong sense of community, and by working in groups, you can benefit from each other, and you can support each other. And no one knows everything. No one is an expert in everything. And so when you help someone out in one area, they can sort of return the favor, whichever time order, in some other. So this should not be a concern. But if you don't know, well, there's no time like the present, and it's always good to get started. And that's why, in this case, I think the Career Accelerator, you look at the outcome after roughly 6 months in total. How have you grown as an individual? I don't mean height-wise, but mentally sort of grown, and how has your skill set grown? So, of course, you should wish in any type of study to learn new things and advance your skill set. But no prior knowledge is expected. So take it literally from assuming nothing. Of course, those who have some prior exposure, they will know perhaps those very basics, but even so, brushing up on the basics is never a bad thing. When I was teaching as a PhD student, it was for a first year undergraduate course, easy peasy stuff, right? Well, when you teach something, it really forces you to, even though it may be the basics, it really forces you to quickly forget the basics, and to be well trained in the fundamentals of anything, I think, is always a worthwhile exercise, because if you don't use something, you lose it. So whether you have no coding experience or some, I think it's always beneficial to go back to the start.
Amazing. Awesome. And then we have a question from Lena. You should be able to unmute yourself, Lena.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Hi.
We can.
Great. Thanks for the question. I mean, it's related pretty much to one of the previous questions regarding, obviously the impact of the accelerator on the career. I'm not sure how many batches you already had. Was it one or more? But generally, I'm wondering what kind of, what did you see with the participants from previous batches? Did you see them already switching career? I don't know, what will their path? Because obviously one of my considerations is what kind of impact it will have on my career. How can I easily switch or not easily switch to more analytical role? Currently, I'm working in more in product management. So yeah, just how did you see this evolving, and how do you see generally this can help? Because I know that you have some industry partners. Do you think this somehow can help? And yeah, if you can a bit expand on this.
Of course, I see from the chat you were in Prague. I visited Prague 3-4 years ago. Beautiful city, loved it. Really nice. And Karlovy Vary, if the pronunciation is right. Yeah, and I'm a bit of a James Bond fan, and I was unaware that this was actually the film setting for Casino Royale, because in the film it's mentioned it's set in Montenegro, and I assumed the place it was filmed in was in Montenegro, but I didn't realize that they lied.
I actually didn't know that it was in Karlovy Vary. Okay.
Yeah, and there's the Grand Hotel Pup, it's pronounced. That's what played the role of the Casino Royale in the film. And you go there, beautiful day trip. I loved it, and lovely to walk around. And there was it's used, I think, in many films. And on the driveway into the hotel, they've got these bricks, a bit like the Hollywood Walk of Fame. There's a Daniel Craig one and a few others. But it was the best day of my life. Well, not quite best day of my life, but one of in the top 10 because of that great surprise. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Well, we have, this is a very, very new program. So we've only had one cohort to date, and they just started. They were onboarded in January, and they just completed their orientation and have just started their first core content as of yesterday. So, so I can only comment on those. Now, in terms of their backgrounds and why they were doing it, various reasons. For some, it was reskilling. Let's simplify. Let's say broadly, it was a mixture between reskilling and upskilling. Okay, so upskilling, they've already been dabbling with data to some extent, but they like to take this to the next level. Reskilling, have been working in one area and wish to sort of transition into more of a data-driven career, or perhaps to stay in their main role, but to have greater awareness and appreciation about what's possible with data. So it's very diverse in terms of the reasons why people do this career accelerator. Of course, what matters is at the individual level, it's of value to you specifically. And you can see how this can help advance your career. Now, maybe it's a 6-month journey, that maybe at the start of those 6 months, you don't have an exact clear sense about what's next for your career. And as part of the Career Accelerator, you will have access to a career coach, a team of coaches, assigned one, and they will work with you throughout the Career Accelerator about refining CVs, interview skills, and advising about the career next steps. I mean, ultimately, progression in a career will be down to the individual, and one has to take the initiative about applying for things, whether it's promotions or transfers within your existing organization, or whether it's to move to a rival company or completely different sector. So, but long term, I'm going to make a prediction here that our first Career Accelerator cohort is by no means our last, and over time that variation will always be there. And as and when we have career accelerators complete, clearly we wish to monitor where they end up and can be sort of brand ambassadors for the Career Accelerator. Of course, being brand new, there are no such alumni of the program yet, but diverse intake, and I would expect quite diverse outcomes about where they end up and the roles that they take. So, and during the Career Accelerator itself, inevitably, you would find some topics more interesting or appealing than others. Is it the visualization that you think, I love this, and that's what I really wish to focus on? Is it the database management? Is it the programming? Is it the more sophisticated analytics? So we give you some exposure to multiple areas, and in practice, no one's an expert in everything. The chief data visualization officer, if that's even a job role, it would be a great title to have, is not necessarily that proficient in programming. They have perhaps a little bit of expertise, whereas your chief programming officer, again, if that's a job title, may be not so well versed in visualization, but knows the basics. So by having exposure to different things, it's only really through trial and error and experimentation that you find out what really appeals to you. And then, of course, once you found your sweet spot about what really you're passionate about, then you can go on and really specialize in that field. So, yeah, I don't have a single answer about where people will go. I expect it will be highly diverse geographically, sectors, kinds of roles. But again, coming back to an earlier answer about increasing probability of success. What do you judge success by? Is it the job title? Is it the salary? Is it the company you work for? Success will mean different things to different people. But I think the Career Accelerator model, still itself pretty new, not just new at LSE, but within the higher education sector itself. And I think it's fair to say, higher education sector is not known for being that innovative or quick moving. It's quite sclerotic, very slow moving to take innovations. However, I think at LSE, we are sort of ahead, yeah, why not say that, in offering these career accelerators. And why do these new types of program come into existence in higher education? Because it's responding to demand, not just doing a career accelerator for the sake of let's do a career accelerator. It's because there is a demand from industry for people with a good blend of skills. Yes, academic knowledge about how models are built, but also the soft skills that were previously mentioned, and of course in the data sphere, the visualization, programming, etc. As well. So this is a bit of a hybrid program between the academic and the practical. And I think that's a great feature of the accelerator, to give learners, as we refer to, I wanted to call, I didn't personally like that, so I wanted to call the participants the accelerators, because it's a really good title, but I was overruled. Learners, it's too bland. But anyway, as learners, get really the best of both worlds, and can take things forward to wherever you wish, but the world will be ever more data driven, and the more data skills you have, I don't see the downside. In short.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Go to Carla Vivari then for a day trip if I don't know what restrictions are in place.
Yeah,
I recommend it. And also, and they have these. There's these springs. There's some underwater spring network, and there's these series of fountains throughout the tower, about 30 or so, and you can buy a special, I guess touristing, but you buy a special mug and you can actually drink these from each spring, and the temperatures vary and the mineral content varies, but it's meant to be a very healthy thing. It's a great little tourist thing. It's like hide and seek to find the fountains, and as you progress, it was great. Best day trip ever.
Will do, thank you.